First panel is on screening and diagnostics, and Liebig, you could go ahead and run the panel if you like.
So, hi, Brad Power. Nice to meet you all. Now we're ready to get into the all in Vivek's wonderful introduction into the panel. Sorry to be making it up a little bit as we. What's the panel? What are we going to do here? Diagnostics. Yes, we had diagnostics. So, we have a guest panel here, and we're going to ask each of them to introduce themselves and a few key messages. And I might ask them a few questions, and we'll end up the audience, and we'll fill up a half hour, I'm sure, you got time. Let me just quickly introduce myself. I am Brad Power. As Roger mentioned, I'm co-founder and CEO of the Cancer Patient Ad, which is a nonprofit which helps cancer patients and caregivers navigate their care. We run a weekly webinar series. We had one last Wednesday on how a citizen scientist is using AI to guide his care. We had one yesterday on, which Roger moderated, on how a patient is using hemp to manage his pain. It's a range of things from patients and what they're doing to MD, PhD researchers and what's the latest technology. We believe strongly that, as Roger said, our keyword is that CAH patients get better outcomes, and therefore they need to be armed with information. And the way that we do that is through our webinars and through others, sharing of the research and ideas we have. My colleague Ari is also, he'll be introducing himself, but we have an accelerator we have for cancer and startups, primarily in diagnostics and navigation, direct to consumer, which is novel as a business model in this area. And then we're also working on our cell startup, which you may speak to as well. I'm a lymphoma survivor. I was diagnosed 8 years ago. Went through the standard of care, got heart shots, and anyway, the high crest. And then also had CAR-T about 6 months ago in October, and I'm living proof that these treatments work, and thank God for all of the innovation that's happening in testing and treatment. So that's me. That's the background. I'll moderate, but I would ask each of the panelists to spend a few minutes introducing themselves and their key messages. I expect that we'll be talking about two primary domains and questions. One on what's the value of diagnostics and talking about diagnostics, and the second, from a startup perspective, how do we bring diagnostics to market? I mean, you know that it's hard with treatments because they have to go through the standard multiple phase testing and evidence. It takes multiple years and hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. What does it take to get a diagnostic to market? And so we'll be talking about that from the founders' perspectives. We already had my door covered. So, all right. Hey, everybody. Ari Ackerstein. I'm actually incredibly pleased to see groups like this. It makes me just happy that we have so many folks focusing on real important problems in the world. So as Brad mentioned, we lead a health tech accelerator, kind of at the intersection of life sciences and clinical and consumer tech AI. And the other thing that that we're actually focused on, where I spend most of my time right now, is building a cancer AI platform. I think probably as many folks in this room can give you the story about your wife. I'm sure many of us have been touched by cancer, and this is a fractured system. And you articulated well, Vivek, how broken the U.S. healthcare system is and how difficult it is for cancer patients to actually navigate that system. And so you think about this fractured market. At the same time, you have these exponential technologies leveling the playing field. And so what we're really thinking about is how do you actually help patients be empowered to make the decisions that they actually need to get the better outcomes that they're unlikely to get relying if they rely solely on their oncologist, their medical team, as well-meaning as they are. Everybody is kind of navigating this really fractured market. And so we're kind of focused on 3 or 4 areas. On the one hand, providing access to basic medical questions, to behavioral, to kind of running the gamut and using AI systems to actually level that information asymmetry that typically exists between patients and doctors. And so helping them navigate that from a more empowered perspective, offering guidance on precision diagnostics that are typically underutilized, in some cases very underutilized by the provider systems due to the incentives that are often misaligned with patient outcomes, and a fee-for-service model. Connecting patients with one another through communities, as many of us who have gone through this have realized, is that we get a lot of value by talking to other cancer patients that are further down the road that you are. And then we have about something on the order of 250,000 kind of point solutions, which you might think of as very specific, narrow verticals doing some kind of solving some piece of the pie or some piece of the elephant from an ecosystem perspective, and ensuring that patients can actually access those through personalization on the platform. I'm a cancer survivor myself, spent most of my time in consumer technology, and really was shocked to see just how fractured and broken the system is for patients, and kind of shifted to actually focus in on this problem space. So I'm sure we'll get into more detail, but that's me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rajan Kapash. I'm a medical science liaison at Grail. So I work with the Gallery reps in the Bay Area as the clinical point of contact for their clients, the doctors who order the Gallery test. I'm a genetic counselor by training, and I started my career in the perinatal genetics clinic at Stanford Children's, where one of the most commonly ordered tests was a blood-based screen analyzing cell-free DNA fragments in the blood to detect chromosome abnormalities like Down syndrome in pregnancy. So sometimes these tests would reveal incidental findings that indicated maternal cancer, a discovery that ultimately helped pave the way for a similar approach in oncology. And that's what put Grail on my radar, and I became fascinated by the potential to apply cell-free DNA technology to screen for cancer earlier. So as some of you may know, at Grail, our focus is our multi-cancer early detection, or MCED test called Gallery, which identifies a shared cancer signal across many different types of cancer, most of which have no current screening today. And the way that it works is that our AI algorithm looks at methylation patterns on the cell-free DNA, like a QR code, to determine if cancer may be present and predict the tissue of origin with high accuracy. So this represents a new paradigm shift. It's one simple blood test that complements existing screens and potentially expands the opportunity to catch cancers earlier, where outcomes can be dramatically improved. So one key message I'd like to share today is that early detection is no longer just an aspiration. It's becoming a tangible and sealable tool, but scientific innovation on its own is not enough. We're seeing firsthand that successful adoption requires trust, clinical education, thoughtful navigation of the diagnostic pathways, and clear value for both patients and providers. And the second takeaway is that we are also writing the playbook on how to responsibly bring novel diagnostics to market. This requires partnership from clinicians, health systems, regulators, and payers to balance the promise of novel tools against the rigor of evidence generation and the realities of clinical workflow. So I'm excited for the conversation around how we as a field can continue to accelerate the science and the real-world impact of cancer diagnostics.
Rajan, thank you. Let me just pick up before I open up the audience, and just pick up on your last point, which I think pre-screening is probably the most challenging aspect. But if you've been diagnosed with cancer and you want to get more information, having a test that gives you more information, everybody would sort of understand that. If you're, in my case, you have a disease and now you want to monitor that disease, also fairly straightforward. You probably get an insurance company, you pay for that. It's where you're doing pre-screening when I think it's like that Jack Nicklaus stuff, you can't handle the truth. Like there's a lot of concern that patients can't handle the truth. That's what issues where 23andMe had. So can you speak a little bit, and then Vivek and Ari as well, can you speak a little bit to the challenges of, which you alluded to, regulatory acceptance, payer acceptance, and then clinician acceptance? Apocryphally, they say that it takes 17 years for a technology innovation, not just evidence space, to actually get into widespread practice. Can you speak to that evolution between when something is evidence-based, better, useful, and getting adoption by a doctor who, went to medical school 20 years ago, doesn't know about this. And you got something that's better, but it's not going to be on standard of care for at least 18 months. And it's not going to be a widespread practice for possibly years.
Yeah. There are multiple levels to that question. I think there's a shared responsibility between the physician to stay on top of what is out there, hard to do in certain organizations. And when you're seeing like 30 patients a day, I get that you have limited time. So then that's why you have companies with medical teams like Grail has, where you have people whose job it is to go out and educate with providers about what's out there. And all we can hope for is that while new technologies are not standard of care, not broadly covered by insurance, at least conversations are happening where patients can be made aware of it. Because you don't know who's willing to pay $1,000 for a test that might change their life. You don't know who's touched by cancer in a way that they want to know about this, even if it's not, FDA approved yet or in the standard care guidelines. Those things take a lot of time, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't offer them until reach those milestones. That prenatal test that I referenced is standard of care now, never got FDA approval. And single cancer screens at one point were not standard of care. Mammograms were not routine. So it does take many years for that to get there. I think the clinical utility of a new technology or any kind of test is going to come down to a specific patient scenario, and we would defer to clinicians to have those conversations with their patients. Not everyone's going to be a reasonable candidate for every type of test, but for Gallery, for example, we believe that any adult at elevated risk for cancer should be offered the test. And then if the patient says, I don't want to know, okay, you don't have to have that information. If they are fully consented on what the test can tell them, what the limitations are, and then they make that decision and they feel empowered by the conversation they had with their physician, that's the best that we can hope for.
So before I go to Vivek, I just want to underline something which we believe of cancer patients, I believe Roger in particular, because we believe that empower patients and be educated about a test that they believe they need. And they go to their medical team and say, why can I not get this test? And I get this test, here's the evidence. Here's the medical research, here's the cited papers, and the doctors may not know about it, but a patient who just checked on ChatGPT, despite the hallucinations, may come on with something that they should consider for their care, so that partnership with an empowered patient, we believe, could accelerate the pace of acceptance of innovation. And again, Roger's story is a good example of that, where he asks, should I get this test? The doctor says, no, I wouldn't. And despite that, he did it, and then he took the results and saved his life. So that's the kind of story that we like too. It's like, you have some comments. Yeah, what I see happening is that this is what it called. What I see happening is that we're going to have AI that sits on top of data, which guides us. So my strategy right now is to provide the entire comprehensive data, every element that's found. Like the example I gave with my CTO and his urine. The entire periodic table of elements will do the entire set of bulk organic compound to every compound we've recognized, provide that complete data set to the patient and tune it to an 8 and let the AI on top of it analyze, take other information you have and guide your journey. Right? And now as far as the regulations and everything go, I'm going to have to deal with all of that. Just right now I just want to get the technology out there. And let people use it for whatever they want to, let other companies build on top of our platform the solutions. You let them worry about how we communicate it, whether the patient is ready or not ready. I'm doing the platform on which we can transform the entire industry. Great to be disrespectful, but my goal is to eat great for breakfast, LabPort for lunch, and the entire medical diagnostics industry for dinner. That's my ambitious side. And I'm going to do it in the next 12 months or so. Get the technology out there and make it happen.
Well, Tarzan year first. Predictions is like an Elon prediction, and already see whether there's drivers, let's do that. If you do it in 24, it'll be remarkable. The one thing I would add is that, we're kind of making the implicit assumption that a lot of this is driven by the medical system, your oncologist, and I think what we see kind of day to day at Cancer Patient Lab and other places is that you have a very small kind of percentage of patients that actually do lean in. And I think the standard wisdom is very few people will actually lean in, get involved. They treat it like brakes on a car with respect to how much thought they'll put into it. And that may be reasonable, but I do think that there's sort of artificial silos that just mean that entirely overwhelming for a cancer patient who may be actually in a highly emotional state. And so even by the time you get to the place of asking for the Grail test or for like, you're not even oriented to know what test to ask for, what the hell is up and what is down. And so I think even at the very foundational level of a little bit of education was an incredibly far way in reducing the friction that patients feel in terms of actually engaging at all, and everybody's bringing their own kind of mental model on, deference to the white coat versus, pushing back or whatever it is. People are bringing very different aspects to their care, and I think that there actually is a lot of room to help reduce that friction so that patients can get more involved and actually ask the intelligent testing, get to the place that they're actually asking about precision diagnostics, genetic testing, whatever it actually is, and get better outcomes, whether you're monitoring any remission or whether you're newly diagnosed. It kind of runs the gamut, but I think there's still a lot of room there, even outside of the fundamental innovation, which is absolutely necessary as well.
So I'm going to now improvise a little bit, and I'm looking at my two friends, Chris Sato and Gita Pierce, and I'm going to ask them to speak to these same questions. So you're thinking about your answer. So the question for you is, these are two diagnostic companies. They're friends, longtime friends. You ready, Ita? Okay.
Yes.
She's ready to go. Yeah. All right, Ita.
So I want to comment on eating anyone for lunch because we're going to have lunch later. I'm happy to eat you. I don't think it's...
See the first in English.
My name is Kitty Peterson. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Genomics Patient. I encourage you to stay long here to hear my story. I think I am an RNA enthusiast because there's a difference between mass spec, DNA, and RNA. And I believe that the future is multi-nodal. And I'm European, so we're gonna eat each other. I don't think that's what's gonna happen. I think what's gonna happen is that we're gonna collaborate. Screening diagnostics have moved the needle faster in improving outcomes for cancer patients than any of the drugs we developed so far. Yet, we over-invest in drugs, we over-prescribe drugs that don't work, and we need to change the vocabulary. So, I'm looking forward to it.
No, I agree. It's collaborative, by the way. Let me I was just trying to tease you. What has been your experience in your company in getting your diagnostic to market? Because I know you pivoted several times. You've been on the funding bandwagon all the time. Talk a little bit about the challenges you faced and what state.
So fundamentally, diagnostics are underfunded by a venture capital, and we've been struggling. I'm not a spin-up from Harvard or Stanford or any of these brand names. I come from Novo Nordisk. I have invented, developed, manufactured, and launched products globally. And I have a degree from DTU. Nobody knows what that is. And I think differently. So I can tell you a little bit about my own experience. We know the payer system is completely broken here. And Braille is going to struggle. I spoke with Kevin Conroy, the colon cancer, guy. How long time that took to get that covered by insurance? I had my own experience because I asked for it when I turned 50. And my insurance didn't cover. So I had to go for a colonoscopy. I had no risk. That's much more expensive. That's so stupid, right? The second time it was covered, and you know what the practitioner told me? If it's positive, you have to do the colonoscopy. Yeah, I know that. But that's because I have cancer, right? So it's the even on the provider level, there is such a gap in understanding the power of diagnostics. And I hope Royal puts a shitload of money after educating them because they truly need it. Furthermore, in a community setting where 80% of cancer patients are being treated, they're not even being treated according to guidelines. They're not being tested. That's why. There's such a gap. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Gita. Chris. So Dr. Chris Apple, Sage Meg, good friend, Lopo. In Palado. It's an honor to be here on during this meeting. Dr. Chris Apple, MD, PhD, originally a anesthesiologist, intensivist. I had my father dying of lung cancer, and basically he was using therapy because when he took care of a mother who had ovarian cancer and said treatment didn't work in her last months of life, he said to me, "Unless you can promise me, son, this is going to work, I don't want it." And I understand it. I was on the cancer IRB at UCSF at that time for already 5 years. I spoke to Terry Yahan and I asked him, well, what's the chances that this will work? And he said to me, oh, you don't want to know. And I said, well, I'm also a biostatistician. I'm teaching a bioscience. So tell me the numbers. And when he said to me, it's 30% for a stage 4 lung cancer, that there will be an objective tumor response to carboplatin. I said, what are we doing here? Here at our IRB, we really make sure patients get at least standard of care. And yet, we're losing the patients at our own guinea pigs. It's not right. And I said, well, wait a minute, why are we not taking the tumor? Why are we not testing this? Oh, if we tried before, we know it doesn't work. I did the data, it works, can be done. Let's do CSF, founded Sage on my own dime, and now we have a clear certified test where we can create hundreds of microtumors from a patient sample within 1 day, debug it, and have a result within 7 to 10 days for the all countries. Great. GS certified, LBT, no need for FDA approved. Like market penetration, very different. And that's, I see, the brain's main question. Why is it so different? First of all, patients don't know it. They are getting their surgery, all the remaining tissue is thrown into formalins and instead can't test it anymore. How to do a functional, precision or quality test. And then the next question is, if the patient knows about it, says to the oncologist, I failed first second line therapy, can I have this? Well, then we need a biopsy. If it were for a genomic test, though, it would probably be okay. But because it's not a genomic test, it's kind of, well, do we really know it? And the challenge for oncologists, and we talked about is 30 minutes or 20 minutes per patient or 30 measures per day. The challenge is that the oncologist already is feeling pushback from many areas. Insurance may not want to cover certain treatments, even if it may make standard of care. And so oncologists, with their workflow, need to navigate how can they make clinically accurate, relevant decisions within a limited amount of time. The only way to go through that is to adhere to the guidelines verbally. It's guidelines. If anything's outside of the guidelines, it would throw off basically the whole time process. And the oncologist also has a concern, is it still considered standard of care? What about, can it have liability implications? The patient has to pay for it. I don't want to ask the patient for that. And so there are a lot of hurdles there when it comes for a patient asked it for something that goes beyond standard of care. And so it does require, in my mind, a lot of patient education. It requires the voice of the patient, and the patient, like Roger, being insistent and say, I don't take no for an answer. And so patient needs to be educated and empowered. And while you need a prescription by law for a test, if the oncology authorities, if your treating physician denies something that is reasonable to you, I think there should be some responsibility of the physician to address your health concern and not to deep or superimpose on the, I would like to say, the right of self-determination, because that's actually currently not enforced. And I think Rail would do much better, in my mind, if it were not just saying, well, how do we get FDA approval? No, in reality, you don't need FDA approval for legal commercialization of the test. But you are trying to be as
as careful with what you say and with tons of disclaimers so that the FDA ultimately will say yes to you. And you're hoping that with the FDA approval, then finally, also then payers they buy it to this. There are many examples where this FDA being paid in buy it, right? So I actually think it should be much more helpful, thoughtfully.
Well, just to comment on that, there's a reason also. So the FDA approval process is really important for broad adoption of this test when we're thinking about CMS coverage. Medicare populations, they fall into our intended use population just based on their age-related risk for cancer. And Medicare will not pay for a screening test that is not FDA approved. So yes, we're an LDT. We have launched commercially. We've been out and available for over 4 years now. And we're working on commercial insurance coverage on one track while we're offering the test to people who can pay with cash. We are making good progress there. We are covered by a lot of employers of life insurance companies now as a benefit, which is great progress. A lot of people are getting testing through that way. And then we also want to reach patients who have CMS coverage by going through this FDA approval pathway, not because it's necessary for the test to be available, but because we want this to be a population on a screen. And so accessibility for as much of the population as they can get is our ultimate goal. But like,
Thank you. So, sort of as moderators, kind of moving to wrap up by the hour. Yep, 5 minutes. So, final thoughts or reactions, Vivek, Ari, to Geeta and Krista. Ari, in particular, maybe you might talk about our friend Tony and Sir V. One of the things we've identified from a patient's point of view is there's an obvious question: what treatment should I get? I just been diagnosed. What treatment should I get? There's another question, which is, what tests should I get? And we have found very few resources that can answer that question. The one is our good friend Tony Magliasso and Protea Biodiagnostics.
Yeah, so let me actually just back up for a moment. And so several years ago, I was leading one of the biggest second opinion theft products in telehealth. And this is through a company, Included Health. And over time, I think in working with Brad and the Cancer Patient Lab and others and kind of my own particular journey, what I've realized is that what we call this kind of second opinion thing as like this monolithic thing is actually multiple steps. So you have kind of a diagnostic second opinion and a treatment second opinion. And so it's kind of this garbage in and garbage out kind of situation. The way somebody like Tony Magliacco, who runs a company, Protea Biodiagnostics, so kind of full class pathologists. And we've seen time and time again, I think 2 points to cook up from both you and Geeta, Chris. One is that if you don't actually specifically hone in on what test should I get, and let me validate what the diagnosis actually is and make sure that it's right. And oftentimes there's ambiguity there. And the oncologist may not have all the data, all the interests, the incentives necessarily to run those conditional tests, something like the SAGE test that you're conducting is actually pretty remarkable in the band of patients that's going to be relevant for. And you get into the data sibling issue as well, where who owns the tissue, which Chris can talk to you about after, but you really, when you pull on the thread about the data ownership, it is not just records and like that, it's actually tissue, biologics, pathology slides, etc. that is called into question. The second thing is that once you actually get that, and that's a big question, but what we hear from patients often is that oncologists are almost playing checkers, and the best patients are playing chess. They're thinking 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. And a very concrete example would be something like cumulative radiation that a patient could get. And so it could be that part of the standard is getting radiation right now. And it could also be that if you're smart about it and kind of think about a different path, you would actually wait for radiation later, and you might do an earlier treatment with one radiation, such that you kind of keep that bullet in the chamber, so to speak. And so having a strategy, as basic as it sounds, can actually be life-saving for a lot of patients. And so I know we're wrapping up here, so I'll pass on for final thoughts to David.
Well, then I'm a big fan of organoids. I think that is a critical solution. Every cancer patient should go through that process. But bigger than that, I think that there are amazing opportunities right now. It isn't the big companies that are going to solve the problem. It's going to be startups. We need innovative ideas. We need to break the rules. We need to do whatever it takes because we can. We have the power now. we can take it over from big industry and solve the problems and really either cure cancer, every other disease, and make the world a better place. Stop at that. Thank you. So I'll underscore that. I wrote an article that basically said was disruption. And for those of you know, the manuscript research or disruption was written by Clayton Christensen, and he makes a distinction between sustaining innovations and disruptive innovations. And sustaining innovations are same customer, same value proposition, but just a little faster, cheaper, better. And if you have an industry like healthcare, which is a culture of conservatism, because every doctor is trained, do no harm. So basically any innovation needs to be thought about multiple times before you do anything. That's the culture that either doctors come with or they are inculcated with over time. As opposed to Silicon Valley, which is let's run many small experiments and see what works. So that's the Silicon Valley ethic around the same kind of learning. One of my favorite examples is how long does it take to run an improvement experiment in healthcare? Answer, a randomized clinical trial. How long does it take? 5 to 10 years. Okay, how long does it take to run a innovation improvement experiment in Silicon Valley? Let's call it A/B test. It takes about an hour. Do you like the blue button or do you like the red button? Which works better? So Silicon Valley is operating on learning cycles measured in hours, and the healthcare industry is learning cycles measured in multiple years or a decade, which is going to be the faster path to innovation and improvement. So we need more Silicon Valley. We're here. We need more Silicon Valley in healthcare innovation. Not we be more software-like and running small experiments to scale what works. And the answer is, how do you get disruption in healthcare? Answer, startups designed to innovate and empowered and engaged patients who say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, who basically advocate for themselves. So we're trying to empower and enable patients to advocate for themselves and thereby accelerate the pace of innovation in healthcare. Roger Standing.
All right. Our boss. Thanks, guys. Thanks, pal. All right. Our trade's right on time here. Next panel is our investor panel. It's always a very popular panel. I'd like to introduce Danica Dale. She's an investor here, in this case, in Silicon Valley. Could my investors come up to the front?
Well, thank you, Brad. It was great to hear some very touching personal stories, as well as some forward-thinking ideas around the keep it organized. So I'm here with two colleagues, and we're hoping to spend some time telling you a bit about our backgrounds, our perspective on precision diagnostics at the hair, some trends that we're seeing in cancer investing, as well as trends that we aren't seeing. So to start us off, my name is Maldra Dale, and I have a background in cellular and molecular biology, and I met Roger through the Italian government, and then curious to learn more about my panelists, Angela and Suya.
I would like to start by thanking our organizers and Corinne as well, my fellow panelists, and to you as well for coming. I'm Dr. Angela Jimenez. I'm a primary care physician. I have been 2 times founder. I also have a background as a clinical study or site committee member for the National Institutes of Health. I currently invest in companies at the intersection between health and technology. So hearing.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. This is an honor to speak here. I really looking forward to discuss what we are thinking about and what we want to share. My name is Soyoung Park. I'm a general partner of One South Pro Venture Partners. We are a small fund, global fund, to invest in transformative technology to support healthy aging. So I'm actually going to go to the longevity technologies as well as diagnostics, preventative diagnostics therapies and therapeutics. And also I am looking for the synchronization between the traditional healthcare as well as the digital technologies, including AI, robotics, and quantum computers. I'm looking forward to discuss today.
It would be great to hear from both of you how you would define precision diagnostics versus preventative diagnostics, especially when you look at the current companies that are on the market.
Sure. I think both are necessary to improve patient outcomes. But I think probably the main difference between precision and preventative is that preventative is more focused on predicting what's going to happen to a patient regarding an harmful, and precision is more like to adapt even a treatment for that patient.
Yeah, I'm totally agree with you. Definitely, there's some diagnostics we need to go to find out what can be more accurate to the right person. Some people probably don't have the high sensitivity, some many now. But I'm more going towards than diagnostic for more for precision treatment. So as Amaro said, we are what we struggling is everybody is different, so we react differently to the drug we have. And most of the time, doctors spend time to try this drug and that drug and then find a cartel. It took so much time, and it actually gonna read the body too much. So of course, everything's just from diagnostic screening, diagnostics, and also we want to find the precision treatment. How can we actually try to minimize all the adverse effects, but also maximize our efficiency.
Can you speak a bit about how developing digital twins or pulling from electronic health record data sets can inform some of these technologies and a company that you like to invest in?
Yeah, so I have multiple companies. Actually, was this idea is one company actually came from Argentina. They are in New York. Was a water fluence technology. What they really do is they have a basically same like organoid. I met them like 5 years ago, and what they try to do is using your cell and tissue, they find out something like a test kit, and then try all the potential drugs, HC drugs, and the potential cocktails using their AI technology. They try to find the right cocktail, and also maybe even maybe future we can find a more advanced drug specific for you. So that's the kind of goal, and I see more activities nowadays. I also see one company from Canada. They're got correlated with the Saudi Arabia, and they also brought same concept, but in their case, Brazil more advanced in the approach is different. But I actually see this kind of digital twins can be the solution, because now 12 America now allowed using the organoid instead of animal test. And I don't say the animal test will well. We definitely need in vivo instead of in vitro, but still I see there's a lot of acceptance in this kind of organoid testing, and I think this is actually a starting point that we can find a better, I could develop the drugs for the future.
Yes, regarding synthetic data that you collect that is being used to create digital twins, I think it's an important part of how currently startups are dealing with research on development. Especially, we are seeing that for certain cancers, for certain chronic diseases, or for rare diseases, it's really difficult to engage individuals to participate in those clinical trials. So I think synthetic data probably is the next frontier regarding how to do an adequate research and development, especially for certain parts.
When we're thinking about the next frontier, can you tell me how social determinants of health databases can support or hinder that development?
Sure. So, as we previously discussed, I think cancer is not only genetics or metabolomics or coherence. It is also where you live, where you grow, and where you were born. And that is the social determinants scale. Those factors influence the development answer and sometimes the outcomes of cancer as well. So I think it's really important to have a multi-omics database that combines not only the omics side of face, but also the social determinants of health, to have a more holistic view of how a patient can be helped and how can we tailor interventions to have a more precise intervention of that patient.
So Young, I see you nodding. Again, you talked a lot about using organoids to tailor a precise intervention for a patient. And of course, organoids were mentioned in the panel previous, so we can really see their applications across both diagnostics as well as in the eyes of investor. Could you tell me a little bit about how you see multi-omics approach and social determinants of health working together to inform the model you use with the organoid?
I actually totally agree with that, John. Basically, gene is not everything. We actually think gene mutation actually affects your cancer about 7 to 10%. What is the other 90%? After being just a lot of effect. What the analogy usually use is when you have not too much stress, it can be environmental, it can be air pollution, it can be your your bossing at work. When you have some stress, your inflammation goes up. And then when you are young or when you're healthy, your immunology can actually handle this inflammation. So when this inflammation is handled, you can maintain your health. But at some point, with all these kind of different environmental or habits, with your diet and whatever you are mentally frustrated, your body significantly increase the inflammation. And at some point, if your immune system goes down, then it cannot kind of help to control immune system. So that's the time you can see that chronic disease, and also cancer. So when I actually see that all kind of new frontier technologies, we definitely want to treat immunology approaches, but also we want to see your data, can see how you actually react your other kind of approach. But I want what I want to actually bring it is a cytokine approach. So we are talking about on combining two anti-inflammatory cytokine. Cytokine is high toxic. How can we actually handle it? That's the biggest problem. So far, we weren't very successful on that. But we are talking about how we can actually combine this with controlling cytokine, so we can actually measure your own body, how you react to this cytokine platform, and then we can actually provide the best dosage and best treatment for yourself. So that's the kind of one I'm actually see very frontier. And also we will get a lot of data. We are clinical. We cannot live without data. With all this data, what do we do? So far, it was all blocked because it's personal information. You cannot kind of release it. It's all silo. If everything is spread, but now we know the value of the data, and we want to find out what kind of pattern we can find and how we can actually apply it in the the drug. Can be IV, can be oral, can be patch. What kind of delivery method do we want to use? So those kind of all in multiple verticals of our drug development as well as diagnostics, we definitely want to see what is the best system, best structure we can build for that person. But again, we need to find a pattern. We need to kind of have the majority people who can be applied, and then we can go to personalized medicine.
Thank you. It's helpful to hear you talk about the cytokine trends in investing, as well as the importance of clinical data before making an investing decision. Angela, it'd be great to hear your take on trends that you're seeing in cancer investing, and then we'll segue to Lou's introduction of both the herself and the fund.
Great. I want you to raise your hand if you know someone with cancer or any other chronic disease. Amazing. Look around. How many of you are entrepreneurs? Hello. How many of you are healthcare workers? Amazing. We see now to answer your question, okay. More good than trends is what benefits. And I think all the information you just gave me, we can agree that we need more
initiatives and interventions that are focused on the benefit on the population and not only the clients. Having said that, I think it is important to highlight what the longevity field is doing to meet patient. Why? Age is a risk factor for almost every cancer. So it makes sense to invest in companies that are dealing with research and development of longevity pathways and mechanisms to identify novel targets that allow us to have a more customized, personalized interventions for patients and for clinics.
Thank you. It was helpful to hear about how cancer and longevity can work together to care for the patient, as well as the impact of immunotherapies. Lahu, it'd be lovely to hear a bit about you as well as the fun.
Yeah, first, sorry for being late. I'm a Stanford alumni. I used to drive around the campus. So I know the space so well. I know where to park at. The ship is taking less than really hard to find a parking today. I'm Lu. I'm the founder and managing partner of Fusion Fund. We're down in our office is just in downtown Palo Alto. So we have a strong collaboration with Stanford for lots of the tech and the healthcare company. I started Fusion Fund about 10 years ago. So this year is actually our 10-year anniversary. We invest across the United States, focus on enterprise AI, healthcare, and industrial automation. And before I started Fusion Fund to become a so-called dark side investor, I was an entrepreneur. I built and sold my own medical device company to Boston and Tempe before I go to the downside. I really want to leverage capital to support more founder working on the hardest problem, and healthcare is one of the hardest problem. So I think your second part of the question is the trip, right? Yeah. So back in 2017, I published a report in JP Morgan House Conferences, AI in Healthcare. So you can see how early we were passionate and also have strong conviction that AI can play an important role in hosting, specific for cancer. We all know the future for cancer therapy is really just personalization. It's not only just a personalized therapeutic solution, but also going back to what you mentioned earlier about longevity, about the quality of life, how to do early stage personalized diagnostic and how to together with personalize the treatment plan and go from there that would be able to identify the problem early on and go from there. And also recently we're seeing more engagement and also deeply embedded and I know they led cancer and also healthcare application in general. Recently I just invested a company to a vertical model for cell therapy, which is really impressive. They're a partnership with a pharma company already. We also just invested a company. It's actually a spin-off of ARC Institute. And they have this launch of Eagle to, it's a vertical model for sequencing data. And they spin off the company, we actually invest in their early lab and put it to a commercialization pathway. And sequencing data could be a major contributor to the therapeutic solution for cancer. So that's some of the interesting trends we're seeing in the market right now, but more is coming.
It would also be great to hear about trends that you are not seeing and that instead you're hunting for. Can you tell me about a couple topics that you're looking for really interesting startups with really interesting clinical data?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned a little bit, I catch the second part of your answer. I really agree it's about the data saddle issue. That, we talk about healthcare as an industry with a huge amount of high quality data. And also people didn't know 30% of the data we have in human society actually are healthcare related. And only 5% of it we're leveraging for, application right now. So it's very, very, very little being used, but we have so much like a golden mine. We're not leveraging it. But why? Because we have the data isolation issue. Hospital here are not sharing the data with the upper side. Another thing is data curation. Even we said healthcare data is high quality, there's still noise. I always talk about, I'm a material science background. We talk about the term called the signal noise ratio. Now, unfortunately, the signal noise ratio is very low. So how we really have the technology cure the data into a high quality data library and applied AI build application, all of it is specific for healthcare. So I think that's something I really want to see more. In terms of data isolation issue, we're already seeing some interesting company doing federal learning, using federal learning be able to partially solve the issue. It's not a 100% solution yet, so we're also hoping to identify more companies doing that. Another thing is, of course, I know I talk a lot on the AI side, but I really want to see more like small edge AI model be able to run on the local devices. We all know in healthcare industry, you won't be able to upload everything to the cloud. You don't want to upload everything to cloud for the compliance and data privacy issue. So if we, instead of using larger portion, have the small vertical edge model,
have AI run on the edge medical devices, have it already on the local sensors. I think that would be more practical for us, for the hospital system to accept this new technology. Angela, I see you nodding your head.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. I also would like to see anything regarding inflammation as a risk factor for cancer. Why? Because we are seeing that things that we were not associating before with cancer, now they are. And with the development of GLP-1s, now we can prove that actually inflammation is associated with not only chronic diseases, but also cancer. So what you just mentioned is really important. We need medical devices, or software is a medical device that trapped or identify or can do surveillance of many biomarkers of inflammation that may predict outcomes for patients, especially those patients who are at risk of developing cancer.
Yeah, I just want to add. So I'm definitely very into the healthy aging. That's my thesis. So I'm the longevity technologies such as a stem cell, actually reprogramming, as well as the regenerating the cell and gene. So those are kind of something I'm very, very into. But since I just found out we are all female panelists here, so I thought maybe we really need to bring more data and then more solutions for the female cancer, specific ovarian cancer, breast cancer. I lost my mom with those two cancers. And that's probably the one reason I really want to serve the problem. And especially for the woman, we don't see a lot of data yet. And also how hard to diagnose ovarian cancers. It's almost impossible to find it unless you do biopsy. Actually, supporting, of course, like liquid biopsy, we can actually find ovarian cancer with a high sensitivity, high specificity. So I think that's the kind of one area I like to appreciate to and help. So if you help a woman, if you make woman healthy, your family is happier.
I also want to quickly add into that another, I won't say it's not happening, it's still happening, but it's really too early on. We're trying to look for an interesting company doing non-invasive surgery for cancer treatment to remove cancer cell. You know, the typical cancer cell removal basically is to destroy your immune system overall, but there's a new technology to be able to do. Micro-invasive is available already, but how about a non-invasive? Well, it would be great to hear from Dr. D'Souza and Dr. Shi during the morning networking break, because I believe we have some immunotherapeutics and epigenetic focuses on these cancer, as well as some seasoned investors like Michelle Colucci, who has a large non-invasive testing focus. But finally, it'd be great to hear how seed stage to Series B companies can stay competitive in the current global landscape. We've heard a little bit about high-quality clinical data. We've heard a little bit about leveraging existing data to train AI models that respect HIPAA. And we've heard a little bit about being aware of the social determinants of health, how they might affect inflammation. Could you speak a little bit more about how a successful seed stage to Series B company would be using these topics within their operations or their product to be a really attractive investment to your fund?
Before that, I think it's important to also recognize something that was related to the previous question that we discussed before this panel, and that is like how, can you please raise your hand if you had a pap smear before? How many of you love that? That's all right. I think personalization and empowerment of the patient to do it itself for the patient, in this case, is really important. So to answer the other question, I think it's important to understand the startups that really assess the needs of the populations that they're working with. And because that gives them a different insight, not only to develop the product or to do the proof of concept, but also that assures that they're going to have try it, market it. And also I'm interested in companies that have data, that they are developing for their patient, that they are developing, knowing all the hassles and all the full regulations that they need to address in order to have a successful point.
Yeah, and so what I actually asked, it took things. One is a scientific theory. Second, market adoption. That's what I asked. But how I actually measure is when I make a decision commenter, I actually ask three things: data, traction, and variation. So three I want to talk, and otherwise I wait. So you mentioned the three seed and 3A. As a matter of fact, like every industries show different tractions, but I think I value the progression. How you can make progress when we read next time what we will bring, what kind of data we will bring, what kind of traction we will bring. And that's what I actually check him every time. And valuation, of course, that's the time of fundraising event. We will see what kind of value you will bring. Another thing I actually like to talk about what kind of capital efficiency you can actually bring to us. Especially biotech, right now I see it's kind of dark age. Sorry to say that was really hard right now. We haven't seen the meaningful IPO for a while, almost 3 years. So we as you thinking about with the new policies, I think a lot of big pharma will hold off aggressive movement. In that sense, what we really kind of want to see is how you can survive. This is basically capital efficiency. If you maintain the capital efficiency, how you can do the lean kind of operations. And more than anything else, what I like to ask is speed up. So we have one company, everybody will know, very famous company in longevity sector, in silico. In silico said, I found DC 5 or 6 diseases within 6 to 18 months using AI technology. Of course, it's only DC. I don't know how much they can actually improve, but still, your computers are moving so fast. So I want you to ensure that you also speed up and then you can reach outcome as fast as you can.
And before you move on, it would be great to hear an example of what good quality data means to you, as well as a story of a favorite scrappy entrepreneur who was very capital efficient.
Yeah, so a quality data, the one I really like, of course, I want to say predictable data. So I think, maybe it's me, I think even the small animal data is a little bit kind of fade away nowadays. I did cure a lot of VCs that I don't really trust small mouse data more than before. So unfortunately, but that accurate can do large animal data is super expensive and it takes a long time. But I think, as I mentioned, if we can actually ensure that we using the mini organoid, like we can use it for brain, we can use it for lung, and then you can actually kind of quantify, magnify how much you can actually show that in the real human body. But still, it's still in vitro, as you would know. So actually, you kind of find our analogy how we can actually provide to the is equals to in vivo. If we cannot answer it, maybe I think decreases still. And maybe you can come back later. That's part of the answer you hear. So for me, I like to see vivo. But if you cannot do that, at least you can see by the mini organoid, and if you can provide it, it will be better. And of course, next to it could be small animal data.
So I think for us, we invest in seed and Series A. So I think early stage expectation from investors is very different from A round and B round. So for a lot of the company we invest, they not necessarily have a strong validation yet out, even only preclinical data. And also, of course, a pre-approval. But on the other side, just add on one thing to what I panelists are sharing, it's getting a partnership earlier is better. I know it used to be you can just work on your technology, wait till later, but now this collaboration between the smaller startup and the large corporate is essential. And if you don't try to identify potential partnership early on, a competitor will do. And the challenge is even you have a better technology, as long as they start working together, they're migration costs. So I always just suggest early stage founder, even you said, okay, my product is not ready. We have a company I invested about 10 years ago doing the microfluidic for single cell sequencing. And before they got approval ready, they start to have this service contract with large pharma company, just validate their service. Got a little bit,
service revenue, but more importantly, it's a partnership, conversation learning, and also validation of their core technology before approval happens.
Yeah, just a quick remark about that. I was talking with Kaiser Permanente the other day exactly about that talk. And they told me, we start always with eyeballs. And we don't start like big. We always start with little trials in our hospitals. And sometimes I think founders forget the importance of talking to a large scale systems to develop the product. So I think yes.
Well, thank you everyone for hearing our perspectives on digital twins, how to differentiate between precision diagnostics versus preventative diagnostics, and the use of organoids to get you on your path to clinical data. We'd love to hear more from you. We'll all be in the morning networking session, and we look forward to speaking more about your companies, your backgrounds, and your current investing publics. Thank you so much.
Thank you.